senior advisor on the whole concept and psychology of flourishing. And of course, A. Brown, our founder. I love the fact that, two gentlemen dreamed for something a little bit greater than just how can we really help people? How can we really support people? And so tonight, they're going to share a little bit more about the concept of flourishing and how that relates to our coaching program. And so welcome. And Dr. Wayne, I think you're starting us off tonight.
Yeah, no, that would be my pleasure. Anyways, it's always a pleasure for me to be in the presence of greatness as we have, new individuals who are, out there interacting with people, changing lives. So some of you might not know, but my background is a clinical psychologist. And so I've always been passionate about what does it mean for us to actually help people. And I think more of the traditional model, and I think it had influenced coaching, was this idea that people needed help. And so therefore we would come alongside and help them to explore, help them to sort of clarify what might be holding them back, and then we would provide solutions to that. And that model in the research really strongly suggests to us that it's probably less than 10% effective. Because when we start fixing people, we might eliminate sort of the current tension they might be experiencing, but we actually have not enhanced their capacity to understand and navigate future challenges in successful ways. And so part of my journey as a clinical psychologist was moving away from the idea of what's wrong with people to this idea of what's right with people. And many people, sometimes when they're struggling, tend to get very narrow in their focus. They'll focus on all the things that are sort of interfering. And they actually don't really have that ability to take a step back and take a look at what's right about themselves, why they're still in the game, why they actually do have successes during the day or in their life, but they don't acknowledge it because they're so focused on what might be interfering or be troubling them at that point in time. And so I was moving towards this idea of a strength-based approach. It's been around a while. If you take a look at the literature, it's been in the literature for 20 years. And but it's more of a belief system that people actually have the solutions within themselves, that they actually have all that it takes to be successful in life. And the idea of coaching is not so much the idea of coming alongside and fixing something. It's coming alongside and facilitating a conversation that helps people to realize from an insight perspective that no, I actually do know how to create success, and I can transfer that into new situations. So it's more of a process of enlightenment, of asking good questions, being curious, finding out what people are truly motivated for, or what they actually are sort of aligning their passions to, and their desire for certain things in life. And so flourishing kind of came to me about 7 or 8 years ago. I actually had a couple of conversations with Martin Seligman, who's kind of considered the father of positive psychology, and really highlighted this concept of flourishing. But for me, flourishing, I believe, is the goal of what you do with people. People can flourish because what happens when a person starts to develop a deep sense of, I'm okay. I actually am a person of value. I actually have what it takes to be successful, and start to develop a confidence in that. Then they start to see themselves and the world around them differently. They start to see them not so much as a victim or somebody who's limited or somebody who just isn't experiencing the potential that they have. Rather, they see themselves as somebody who needs to step out of their comfort zone and actually try new things in different ways. And therefore, it's more of a self-discovery. It's a discovery of what I can do and what is possible with what I never thought was. And so I invite people into this coaching journey of helping people to discover, what did I do yesterday that I learned and I'm applying today? But what have I learned today that I've stepped out of my comfort zone and discovered that I'm going to apply tomorrow? And it's this continuous cycle of enlightenment, of being able to sort of say, you know something, I was limited yesterday because I never thought it was possible. But today I'm going to try it. And if I fail, that's actually important because if I fail, I'll learn from it. And therefore, I'll be able to do things differently. So a lot of people that I work with kind of get a bit frustrated with me because I said, my job is to actually mess your life up. My job is to push you out of your comfort zone. My job is to get you to step out and try things you never thought possible, because that's the only way you're going to learn. And it really does tie to the brain science of how we as human beings actually learn to develop our potential. And it starts with a feeling. It starts with this, I'm not sure about this. I'm afraid of this. Or I think I can do this. And so it's that idea that when you actually feel something, that actually starts to determine the way you think about something, which then determines how you behave. And if you repeat that behavior, it becomes a conviction. And that's the journey I believe you're inviting people into. So when a person feels afraid of something, that to me is an invitation to you're human. Everybody has fears. And the fact that you have a fear means that that's something that might be holding you back. So therefore, you need to think about what's your sense of purpose? What is it that you're really excited about? And therefore, what you ought to be doing. Because when you think about what you ought to do, then that's the motivation to address fear. You do it irrespective of what you feel because you know it's what you ought to do. And by doing it, you then step into that outside the comfort zone I talk about. And then it's a point for you as a coach then to help them to reflect. So was the fear legitimate? Was the fear real? Was the fear holding you back from something? And when you recognize it again, then you know how to navigate it in a more successful way. And by repeating those behaviors, you create a way of doing, you create a way of being, you create a way of coping that can be repeated over and over again. And then when you repeat it, it becomes a habit and you write these new neural pathways. In my research, I could actually show you videos where we actually develop new neural pathways in a person's mind just because we repeat certain behaviors and create certain hormones that actually establish a new pattern that the brain can draw upon for future reference. And it's really fascinating how as you come alongside, you can't tell a person what to do and create that neural pathway. The person has to step out and experience it because that's how it creates the hormones that ultimately are what the person draws upon again or repeats because they like the feeling that they're getting. And therefore, it becomes the internal motivation and self-determination for the person. So if I was going to take a step back and take a look at the concept of life coaching, I would take a look at it as you're a guide. It doesn't mean that you've arrived. It just means that you're on a similar journey to the people that you're actually supporting. You're learning to step out of your own comfort zone. You're starting to try things that you never thought possible. And it's in that experience that you can actually invite others to become part of. And so it's like you're two people on a journey learning from each other. And I think that's the most amazing gift that I found in my life as a therapist is that if I step into that zone of growth, that growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about, that I'm actually learning as much as my clients are. I'm growing my potential because if I'm not growing my potential, it's hard to guide other people. So you can't give away anything that you're not experiencing. And so as part of my journey, we came to this idea that maybe there was a way to hear that story because we're all very poor tellers of our own story because we're limited by our experiences or our fears and things like that. And so part of the questionnaire that we've designed, it's a way to hear how a person thinks about themselves, how they interpret the relationships around them, and to what degree they actually understand the soft skills competencies that the research has identified as critical for success in stepping out of your comfort zone and trying new ways of developing habits and pathways forward. And an example of one of those soft skills would be the idea that I persist. I never give up. I keep trying things, adapting, learning new things until I get to where I want to go. Another soft skill might be I'm a critical thinker. I always take a step back and weigh the pros and cons of it, and therefore try to make the best choice that will enhance the success going forward. So this questionnaire gives a profile, and then you as a life coach actually have a baseline sort of blueprint of how that person thinks about themselves. And therefore it invites you then to be curious, to explore, to ask questions. And one of the things that I've learned in working with people, by asking questions, you're inviting them to think about other possibilities or other ways of interpreting their situation without telling them what it should be. Because you got to remember, it's their story, not your story. We oftentimes as helpers, we want to impose what we think their story should be on other people. And I'm a big believer that the people that we work with need to own their own story. And so the profile is just a way to hear that beginning story. And then now you're in a relationship where you can start shaping that story that the person owns. They see it as their story. They see it as meaningful to them. And therefore, they're going to own it and they're going to shape it forward. So you may have the privileges of being part of their chapters 3 and 4, but they need to own chapters 5, 6, and 7 and the relationships around them. And so this journey of flourishing it's a discovery of what might be. And every one of your clients that you might work with, it's a privilege, first of all, to work with them, but they have so much potential. It's unrealized potential. And that's the journey that you're opening up for them. You're coming alongside and being that person that they can trust. You're creating the psychological safety they need to take the smart risks and step out of their comfort zone. You're there to celebrate the small milestones that they make towards their goals. And that's something that we talk about in the growth action plan with the thing that you want to establish small milestones that you can celebrate on a regular basis as you move towards the larger goal that the person might want to move towards. And what I have found over time is that oftentimes what a person tells you at the very beginning is their goal is never their goal. Because of the small successes, they start to realize other things, other potentials about who they are. And all of a sudden their goal expands or it grows in ways you never thought possible. And that's the magic of being a coach, is that, again, it's that idea of getting to what might be. If you think you know it at the very beginning, you're probably wrong. By the time you get to the end of it, you're going to wonder, wow, I never thought we would get here. And that's the journey that I get excited about, because I'm not there to tell the person what they should be. I'm there to help them to realize their potential and therefore step out into what they're going to be. So if you guys have some questions, I could certainly answer some of them. I don't have all the answers, but this is really a journey of camaraderie as coaches. It's about learning from each other. It's about sharing stories and being inspired that the people that you're working with have this amazing potential. And that as time goes on, the excitement is that they start to realize it and they start to own it. And therefore, I think one of the things that I've found is that when people understand that you're there to be respectful, to value who they are, to give them that space to try things, make mistakes, learn from it, and grow from it, then they want you to be part of their future journeys as well. So it's never a one-off, but if you establish the right rapport and relationship, it's a journey that you'll have with certain people for years because they see you as that safe place to grow their potential.
That's great, Dr. Wayne. Thank you so much. And, everybody, we are so grateful that you've taken your time, and we will have a good amount of time, or as much as we need anyways, for Q&A right at the end. And definitely you can field your questions to Dr. Wayne or to myself. But before we get to that, I want to kind of just spend a little bit of time talking about what this looks like, I guess you could say, in practice. And I want to talk about this idea of turning your passion into profit. And I know, especially if you're a heart-centered person, that can be a crazy concept to think about, because we're not in it. At least I'm 100% sure that most of us, if not all of us on this call, we're not in it, quote unquote, for the money. But John, I was listening to Connie the other day, and she said something very interesting to me, and I realized I had done the same thing at a certain point in my career, and that was that I had sacrificed my family and their financial well-being at times in the past on the altar of me wanting to serve other people. And it's not in any sense a desire to get rich, but my 7-year-old daughter shouldn't have to pay for my dream. And so how can I take my dream and my passion and make it profitable enough so that I can still take care of my family, but also be in a position where I'm able to fulfill the dream that I have. And so I want to just take a couple of moments and talk about how to be an authentic and heart-centered coach with real impact and real income without breaking the bank. Okay, inventing your own system, and doing it all by yourself. And so in the next 15 minutes or less, I just want to focus on heart-centered and authentic people who want to elevate their influence, expand their impact, and really grow their income. And there's two kinds of people that I want to really speak to today. I want to speak to aspiring coaches. And so maybe you're a person who's not really sure if you want to be a coach or that don't really know a lot about it. But secondly, we want to also speak to experienced coaches. And really, the goal for this is quite simple. We want to share that there's a formula for creating real impact and real income. And that we believe that the way to become a coach who has real impact and real income is with certified flourishing coaching. And so to kind of walk you through this journey, I want to go back and this is, of course, myself. I'm the little kid on the right, and my beautiful mother in the middle, and then, of course, my brother on the left. And that was actually in front of Niagara Falls. That would have been probably around 1975. So that gives you a sense as to how old I am, and, we really in our family didn't grow up with a lot. That's for sure. My mom was a single mom, and she was also a victim of chronic and long-term domestic violence, and as were my brother and I. And so we just didn't have much. And because we had so little, I was always wondering, right, would I have enough to raise a family? Would I have enough to have nice things? Would I have enough to do any real good? And, that thought process kind of lived with me for years. And I got lucky, in that I started to break the cycle of poverty, and I started to do really good, and had some influence and had some impact and had some income. And yet in the back of my mind, like Dr. Wayne was describing, there was a story, and it was a storyline that was a story of, am I worthy, right? Do I actually deserve this? I was convinced that everybody else did, but did I deserve it? Can I sustain this? And the last question was, when am I going to wreck it and lose it all? And I don't have a great news story for you, because I actually did. I kind of laugh now, but I promise you at the time I wasn't laughing. I went through a marriage breakdown. I ended up in a place of unemployment and in career transition. And because of the circumstances of my marriage breakdown and the way some of the sort of religious structures were, I was outcast by the community. And then, because maybe you've been in a vulnerable place too, financially at a certain point, I don't know, I was. And so somebody came along and said, hey, let's invest in this business together. And we did. And literally, this gentleman betrayed and robbed me of $50,000. And at that time, still, that's a lot of money. But at that time, that was everything, And so I ended up having to go through a financial mess and a bankruptcy. And, that wasn't really good for resurfacing a lot of memories of abuse and trauma. And, it led me into a place where I had a deep depression. And that deep depression, I've always wrestled with depression, to be honest. I can't remember a time in my life where I don't wake up feeling intensely sad. That's typically the first emotion that hits me, and just a deep sense of disconnection and loneliness and that sort of a thing. And so all of that had sort of gotten re-triggered through this. I felt hopeless for the future, and actually failed at a suicide attempt. And I'm telling all this to say that I lost it all, but there were some people who kept me alive. My lovely mother, there she is a few years later, and still beautiful. And of course, two beautiful children as you can see in the picture at that time. And then shortly after that, I ended up getting remarried. I mean, probably 3-4 years after that. And all of it was this incredible journey. And there's a ton of ins and outs and bunny trails and places we could go, but that's not our concern here today. I will tell you this, that I lost it all and I rebuilt it, to be honest, by discovering flourishing. Now you might say, well, what is flourishing? I mean, flourishing is about magic. It's about meaning. It's about mattering, and it's about mastery. It's, when you hear the word magic, I mean, I'm not talking about, Gandalf and the wizard, maybe that magic exists. I'm not sure. But when I'm using the word magic, I'm thinking about living an inspired life, right? Living an enchanted life, living a life that kind of glows and that radiates with joy and positivity. It's also about meaning. So you've got some purpose. It's about mattering. You are a person who knows that you bring worth and value to the world. And of course, it's about mastery, developing those skills and leaning into those strengths and stop, trying to fix everything that's wrong, but really becoming the best version of you that you could be. In simplest terms, flourishing is literally just feeling good and functioning well. And of course, what ended up happening in this journey, as part of the journey, I ran into this handsome guy, Dr. Wayne, and he, of course, and we began our collaboration as far back, if you can imagine, as 2013. And he, of course, is an expert, world-renowned in the science of flourishing and also the science of resiliency. And what I began to see as I was going through my process, because at this time I had started to build a coaching business and was doing quite well with my coaching business and had turned, my financial mess into a real place of blessing and abundance. And that has been sustained to this day. But I also saw that, most of the coaching models, if not all, well, let's put it this way. I have personally trained and certified over 8,000 coaches in 20 different countries around the world in the last 12, 13 years. So I'm not saying that makes me, some global expert, but it probably gives me as much perspective as anybody else. And one of the things I've discovered is most coaching models aren't built or based on science. They're also not based around a sense of let's lean into what's right about us. Most coaching models follow the traditional path that psychology and psychiatry has gone down, unfortunately, which is let's fix what's wrong with you, rather than let's find out what's right about you and lean into that. And so here's the bottom line. I do, all of us have the capacity to flourish, but a coach is the one who helps us develop those competencies to flourish over the long term. And in our model, here's what I believe, that our model, flourishing, unlocks your capacity for not only impact, but also income. You see, if you think about it, we all want both of those things. I mean, we need income. You got to have income. You got to pay the rent. You got to pay the mortgage. You got to take care of the people you love. But you don't want to do that in a selfish way. It's not about getting a nicer BMW than the person beside you. It's about how many people can I reach? How many people can I help? How many people can I support? So I just want to share what I call 3 critical steps for increasing your income and your impact. Really, really simple, folks. That's why I'm going so fast. Number 1, resources are not nearly as important as resourcefulness. I'll tell you what, when I started my coaching business, I had nothing. I'm not going to get into all of it, but I was coming out of bankruptcy. I was coming out of a failed suicide attempt. I could count on one hand at that time the number of friends that I had in the world. And I'm telling you, it wasn't about me being well-resourced. It was about me having a sense of resourcefulness. And that is one of the primary elements of flourishing. Here's one of the things, I think is so important. And this is maybe a reminder for you, but listen, don't downgrade your dreams to match your reality. Upgrade your beliefs to match your vision, right? That's the thing. So that's the first thing I had to learn along this sort of flourishing journey. The second thing I learned, and this one is, I think, really important, is that creating a model is not as important as following one. And I'm going to say that again, because that sort of seems counterintuitive, right? I mean, we live in the golden age of entrepreneurship, and hey, I'm into it. But what I find is a lot of people out there, working really hard to create their own model, and they'll spend a long time building a model only to discover that they can't monetize it. And it's sort of like that person who, spends their whole life climbing a ladder only to realize that it's leaning against the wrong building. And so, here's what I also have discovered in my journeys. It's successful people, they know two things. Whatever you're trying to do, someone's already done it. And secondly, it's best to learn from those who have done it already. And so, in my, like I said, over a decade of training thousands of coaches and working with them, I've kind of found out that there's three kinds of coaches, really just three. The first is coaches with influence, but no real income. Okay. And, that might sound pretty cool, but the problem with that is that then it's not sustainable because you got to eat. Number two, I've seen coaches who have impact, but no real income. I mean, literally, I was talking to somebody about 2 weeks ago with 200,000 followers on Instagram, and they're heartbroken that they can't figure out how to monetize it. And the third thing I found is that there are aspiring coaches who don't really have anything. They don't have impact. They don't have influence. They have very little income. And so here's the final thing that I really want to say, that certified flourishing coaching is a model. I'm not saying it's the model, but I'm telling you straight up, this is a model for both impact and income. And you might say, well, how come? That's a big claim to make. And yes, it is. And here's why. I think number one, we're evidence-based. I think that's awesome. We're living in a world where, some guys, model that they wrote that doesn't have any backing is probably not going to stand the test of time. The second thing is that the science of flourishing is actually the key to true success. So if you and I want to succeed, the science of flourishing is the key that will help us to do that. The third thing, and this is a really important one, is we teach you not only how to coach, but also how to build a business. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that learning to coach is actually pretty easy. It's about asking the right questions. It's about being an empathetic listener. It's about not trying to steer your client too much. I mean, really, it's not that hard to learn those skills. Most people who even want to be a coach already have a lot of those intuitively built. And so when you are trained as a coach, of course, those skills get refined, but it's not like, it's some brand new revolutionary skill. It's like listening, looking people in the eye, actually caring when people are talking to you. But the breakdown for most coaches is when it comes down to building their business. And it's sort of like, how do I take this and actually monetize it? The fourth reason I think our model works so well is because we're truly global. Now, we just launched less than a year ago, if you could imagine, and we're already in over 10 countries around the world. And it's just amazing to see how many people we've trained and how we're growing. And of course, there's no limit, because 10 countries, there's a lot more countries to hit. And the last reason I think it's so important within our model is we provide a supportive community. And this might be the biggest factor. Coaching is, it's not hard, but it is emotionally draining, right? There's no doubt about that. I mean, if you genuinely care, if you really are leaning in, if you are empathetic, all of those things, well, that takes something out of your personal emotional bank account. And there's nothing more powerful than a community of support like we have in our Flourishing Tribe that not only will help you and be there for you when you're down or when you're discouraged and help lift you up, but also will be there to support you with business skills. And I'll tell you, the other thing I think that's kind of cool, and this isn't, something that is one of the official reasons, so to speak, but we actually have 10 different niches of coaching certification. And, so we actually support you in everything from relationships coaching to parenting coaching to wellness coaching to leadership, business, creativity coaching, and on and on and on. And this is so exciting, that not only are you going to become a subject matter expert in the science of flourishing, but you'll also become an expert in these various different coaching niches as much as you want to. And so, I would just encourage you to think about, if you can, one of the best things I imagine that you could do if you're interested in just exploring this further, is just book a discovery call. And it's really easy to do that. The easiest thing to do that is to shoot one of us an email. Our email addresses are really non-complicated, So mine is abe@wellnessinnovate.com. Connie is Connie@wellnessinnovate.com. Cynthia is, you're probably going to guess it, Cynthia@wellnessinnovate.com. And the idea there is just set up a 20-minute session and let's have a conversation about it. And so kind of on that note, we would love to take your questions. I'm going to sort of formally turn it back over to Connie as the MC, if I can use that term. You're the MC, right? MC Hammer, MC on the rapper, dance floor, but,
Can't touch this.
Love to see if any of you have any questions. And I'm sure Wayne would be happy to answer, or myself, or however you guys want to play it.
Yeah, Luann.
I just love you guys, and I'm so glad I'm here because you guys just ooze positive, and man, I just love to soak that up with you. Where I think I struggle a little bit is I'm not where I want to be at the moment. I'm in a bit of a transition. So how do I possibly feel okay going into this work when I'm not feeling that I'm completely focused as I should be?
Can I answer that? Because I tell people I'm not exaggerating. When I started my coaching business, I'm not exaggerating. I was like a year out of a failed suicide attempt. My marriage had ended 2 years before that. I was in the biggest career transition in my life. I had been in a career for 13 years and I had no money. I couldn't even get a credit card. I couldn't even get, the ones that you pay ahead of time. I couldn't get one of those. I'm like, I've got cash, please take it. And they're like, no, you have to wait, X number of years or whatever. And you want to know what my thought was, Luann? I know this sounds crazy, but for years before that, I had been a pastor. And for several of those years, I'd also been a registered therapist. And the thought that came to me was that as screwed up as I am, there were people more screwed up than me, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find them and I'm going to help them. And I know that's crazy, but let me tell you, Luann, it worked. You might be looking at yourself right now and thinking, I'm in transition. I don't have a lot to offer. Luann, you are a gold mine. I know you. You've got so much integrity, so much knowledge, so much heart. I mean, so much experience, right? So there's a ton of people who would get so much benefit from you. Now, if you were trying to coach somebody who in their journey, let's just use that as an analogy, is like way ahead of you. Well, that wouldn't really work because, it would feel probably awkward for you too. But for somebody who's a younger executive in a nonprofit, or somebody who's trying to break into the executive ranks, for somebody who's, how do I manage my team of volunteers? I mean, there is so much gold in you. So I think one of the stories we can tell ourselves is, I'm not enough, but when are you enough? What do you have to accomplish to finally feel like you're enough, right?
Thank you, Abe. Thank you.
We've got you, Luann. We're here anytime you need us. Anyone else have a question? You can put it in the comments. You can unmute.
I just had a question. If you could give us a quick rundown, or I don't know if you'd rather do this on a discovery call, of like what is the certification process? Like how long is the training? Like to give us a little bit more of those details.
Yeah, so the training is actually 2 days, which is great because that means that you're getting a lot in those 2 days, and it has some pre-work modules from Dr. Wayne that we get in there, and then we have some post-work modules as well to be able to help you set up your coaching business. That way we can pack those 2 days with the psychology and the science of flourishing and our change model. So we basically walk you through 6 steps of how would you move someone who is languishing, who is experiencing, the reason why they would ask for a life coach, and how do we move them not to resilience. I realized after my 20 years of working in resilience work that resilience many people are resilient. I mean, if you're here after 2 years, you're resilient. You're still standing. You might barely be standing, but you're here. Maybe resilience is a bit of a secondary goal. What if we could move people past the idea of just being resilient to flourish, where they're finding that meaning and that mattering? And so we actually walk you through 6 steps, our change model on how you would get someone there. And it's great because it's literally laid out for you. And that's what we teach you in those 2 days. Plus, you get a lot of experiential learning and practice, because one of the things that we believe at Flourishing is that people learn best by doing, not just by hearing.
Yeah, and that's a great response, Connie. And each of these other domains we have, so you know how I shared that list of 10 different ones. Each of those is also set up around a 2-day intense with 4 hour essentially modules of pre-work and then 4 modules of post-work after the fact. And so, you know, by the time somebody would have gone through all 10 of these, they would have had a ton. Not everybody goes through all 10, and that's okay. So it's really about taking your pick of what are the areas. You know, there's ways that you can package them together so that you could do 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, you know, so it just comes down to which way you want to go. So.
And we noticed there, Kelsey asked about the price, and Cynthia's answered there. We have an early bird rate of $12.97 plus GST. And the discovery calls, I mean, Kelsey, you and I, we need to get on a discovery call. That's what we need to do, and just chat about that. And there's no cost for that because we love you. And Cynthia just posted the website there in the chat, and that way you can find out more. There's trainings that go on all throughout the entire year. It's constantly being offered. Abe and Dr. Wayne offer this once a month. If anybody wants to jump in on Thursday and Friday, I'm doing it that early if you want to jump in. And Larita has asked, what is the blended version? That there's one in March. Abe, what is the blended version?
Well, I mean, there's blended. Essentially, I think what you're referring to is just packaged. So they often people will buy like the life coaching, because the life coaching is the foundation before you can take on any others. But people will get life coaching and parenting, or life coaching and creativity, or life coaching and leadership. And then maybe blended also means hybrid, you know, both online and in person. So we are starting in March going to be offering the training in our Calgary facility, both in person and online. And, you know, so we do that. And then once a month, also, I just do it online, focused on the Eastern time zone. So we're getting back into in-person learning, of course, as people are more comfortable with that. But there's also people who may not be comfortable yet, or may have reasons they can't actually physically show up. So then there's a broadcast online. So does that answer the question, Larita?
Yeah, that definitely does. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions before we head out for the night? Well, if you do have any further questions, you have our email. You can reach out anytime. And we just want to thank Abe and Dr. Wayne for your passion and your expertise tonight. We're so thankful that this has been something that you have worked on and offered as a solution to problems that our world is facing. I feel like it's serendipitous that it's actually come out right now in this season. And so thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and please reach out and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks so much, you guys. Really appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Luann.